Hello, everyone. Good evening. Welcome to day 2 of Cyber Week. Yay. We'll wait a couple minutes for folks to join. How's everybody doing on this fine Tuesday? Any exciting news? Nothing. I didn't do anything exciting today, so if anyone else did, please feel free to share. Hello, hello. Couple more minutes, maybe like 2 more minutes, and then I will get started.
Sounds like it's about to storm really bad right now here.
Oh, good point. I should check that on my side too, actually. Let me see.
Oh no, Latonia, that's bad.
Oh no, that is bad.
I probably jinxed myself too. I told my boyfriend I don't remember the last time I lost power. Like
that now it's gonna be today, Caitlin.
Now it's gonna be today. I make fun of him because he grew up like out near Utica and he loses power all the time at their house. And I'm like, I've never lose power. Everything's great.
Well, happy Tuesday. No, hopefully you don't. Fingers crossed.
I hope not.
Oh, Brandon,
I have the option back.
Oh, yay! Yes, that's so great. Okay, cool.
So weird. Okay.
So perfect. We won't do that right away. You see it in the slides when we say we're doing it, but that's when. You're muted, by the way, Caitlin.
Sorry, I thought I unmuted myself again. I think I can set it up ahead of time.
Oh, okay.
And then just like trigger it when we're ready. We'll see.
How do people even join them? I don't even know how that even happens.
You just force them.
Okay.
Great. You assign it.
Perfect.
Not force them. You like assign people to the room and they
have to go there. Okay, great.
Yeah. Cool. I'm pretty sure, I don't know what kind of message you guys get for breakout rooms, but I think that's what happens. Like it tells you you're going to a breakout room and then you just like go.
I thought we had to click something. I thought there was a button that says join now.
Oh, you might have to.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
But I think eventually, no, you're right. I think there's a way to automatically do it, but then it doesn't work the same. You can't like choose the rooms.
I see. Okay.
Choose who's in each room. Then they have to click the button and say like, okay, join now or whatever. What Latonia said. So
makes sense. Cool. And I see that Dominique just lost power. So I will say that if anyone loses power tonight, it's fine. So we'll know in advance if you drop off or if you freeze, you're gone on the stratosphere of technology. But Caitlin, I guess I'll ask you what normally happens if like majority students were to lose power or something in that event. We shall see.
We just wing it. I don't know.
Hopefully that doesn't happen, but we will play it by ear. Yeah. All right, it's 5:34. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. And And we're just doing a recap anyway. So for whoever is joining, they'll just join for the recap. Alrighty. Let me share my slides. Presenter view. Zoom, share screen. I have way too many tabs open. I'm notorious for having like 77 tabs open. Today I don't, thankfully. I put them in different windows, but I still am normally known for my horrible tabistry. Haha. Sometimes I crack myself up. Anyway, Module 12, Cybersecurity Fundamentals, Web Security. If you're here, this is where you should be. If you're not supposed to be here, you're going to learn some cybersecurity today, but you're all supposed to be here, so it's fine. Okay, recap from yesterday. Again, what we're covering this week is going to be the basics of cybersecurity, which are going to cover two kind of realms, the attack vectors and then the defense controls. So we will be finishing up attack vectors tonight and getting a really good chunk of defense controls done tonight. Tomorrow is going to be web application security and really focusing on securing your actual capstone project, very strategic to yourself, which you are going to be starting some brainstorming tonight, but tomorrow is going to be really diving deep in what we talked about yesterday and today to really put that into practice. And then Thursday is really just going to be a real free-for-all day. We're going to have good discussion on our capstone, how we can secure that, what our project is, which I'll go over probably tonight. And we'll talk about careers, and you can ask any questions in a Q&A. So Thursday will be a pretty chill day because yesterday was pretty lecture focused. Today's pretty lecture focused. Tomorrow will be the same. Oh, something else I do want to say too is I know in your first 11 modules before the strategy is usually first half of class lecture, second half of class coding or actual demonstration of that. But you'll notice that that's kind of different in the cyber module. So I just wanted to touch base on that and let me know how you're feeling. If you think I'm moving too fast, if the concepts are not making sense and we can bring things to different levels. But basically, I'm trying to get through this whole lecture piece yesterday and today. So tomorrow can be a really good focused piece to your actual projects. And Thursday, we can bring it all together. Any other questions on kind of module recap before we get going? All right. Okay, so yesterday's recap, and I like to start every day by doing this, so it'll take a couple seconds and we just kind of go through it. Weakest links, human beings. We are the weakest link. The end user, we are the weakling. We cause the problems. We make the mistakes. We attack people. We write the code. It's us, okay? We need to be trained. What's phishing? It's fraud. It's an attempt to grab information from someone electronically by pretending to be someone that is worthy of grabbing that information, but they are not. Remember those statistics, 86% of those email attacks don't even contain malware. It could just be a clickable URL, some executable something that isn't specifically a piece of malware, but it's some other piece that is really there to trick you, that you need to place that extra eye, that analytical eye, to really be able to detect. And then, like we talked about, what's malware? Something bad. So no one should ever be able to convince you from this point on that malware is good and this is a good thing. And I promise you, this is a good piece of malware that doesn't exist, okay? So malware is software that's intentionally created to cause damage to any sort of entity, whether that's a user, a computer, a server, client, network, anything like that. And then we ended yesterday by hitting the top 10 Owasp web security risks, which we are going to start off with today, finish up, and then get into defense mechanisms. All right. So Yesterday, we talked about SQL injections. This, remember, occurs when untrusted data is sent to a SQL database, okay? So this is a piece of code, a line of code that's a query that's normally just injected, literally, that's why it's a SQL injection, into the existing code to manipulate that, to delete it, to edit it, to erase the database completely, etc. So what does that look like? And forget the top being in a different language, but this is really what that query would look like, for example. So this is a simple query. It's just grabbing all of the usernames and all of the passwords. Okay, so remember, I'm not sure if how deep you guys got into SQL during your cohort, but remember that SQL queries are very simple, okay? SQL queries are written to simply grab some information, return that. They're not supposed to be crazy lines of data, as you know. So this is a simple select query, okay? But what this is doing, though, is this is selecting all of the usernames and their associated passwords of anyone who's ever inputted information into this database in any way. Okay. And obviously, if your database is not protected, and if you've got, we'll talk about those defense mechanisms, but if you don't have that properly hardened, you can have an attacker grab all of that, right? Let's think of that in a large sense, like Bank of America, okay? Think about all the usernames and passwords, you know, that Bank of America owns, right, in their database, right? Not only now are these usernames and passwords accessible to some attacker, but the contents within that user account is also accessible to the attacker. So not only do they just have the username and password for whenever they want until the user changes it, they have access to all of the subsequent account information wherever that may be. So can someone tell me where an attacker would want to inject a SQL injection? Where would an attacker want to do this? And which database would an attacker love to try to attack? And which database would an attacker be like, I don't really care, I don't want to attack that one, right? Tell me some high risk areas and low risk areas. Let's think about some. Yeah, I'm seeing them.
Ariel said banking is high, AWS, email of the military.
Emails, yep, all correct. Exactly. So AWS, very important because that's a web server that probably hosts a ton of important information, especially if that's an AWS server that has to do with a bigger company or more sensitive information. Of course, that's going to be a high jackpot. Email of the military, exactly. I like that Dominique specified that because Meliquan, you did say emails, which is correct, but Dominique said email of the military, which is even more important because what Kyle is sending to Carolyn and what Caitlin is sending to me on a Sunday night via email, I don't think an attacker really cares about, but what the US military is sending to someone at this time, that would be like a huge jackpot. What's going on? That's interesting. Jahil just said that a local company that does not have much important data, that's low risk, and that's exactly correct. Low risk organizations are companies that have less data and less important data. For example, you tell me, what's an example of something that's low risk data? What type of information stored in a database is low risk? Public library, there you go. List of books, what aisle they're in. All right, I mean, if someone hacks into that, great. They've got the aisle number of the Roald Dahl book. Wonderful, right? Cool. But cash register, now we're talking about, all right, that's a big deal here, okay? If we're trying to get information on potentially You could say that's important or not. That could be debatable, right? Cash register could matter to certain people if you're trying to track funds of that specific organization, or it could not matter. Birthday invite, exactly, like, but I would argue that too, Dominique. You might not want the whole world knowing birthday invite information, because if you're inviting people, usually you've got their name, email address, phone number, maybe address as that information from the invitees. So that could be something that's low risk. Okay, employee logs. Yes, that's the last one I'll look at, and that's correct. Who cares when Jahil worked yesterday? I don't think a Russian hacker really cares, right? Cool. All right. Another top 10 risk, a web security risk, is broken authentication. So this just means that there are specific functions within your application, and there's not a list of, okay, look at all these functions and they need to be checked off. No, it's any function within your application. If it's not working correctly and it allows attackers to grab information, it's broken. I don't care if that's the login screen, if that's the submit button, if that's the form data. I don't care what that is and what function of your application that is. If it's broken, you're allowing attackers to potentially grab anything that's broken. That means it's broken authentication. So for example here, if this is a SQL database and you've got this authorization a bit broken, like there's a couple roles, I know this image is a bit hard to see, but there's a couple roles here. There's a server role, there's a DB role, there's a DDL admin role, right? They have very specific role definitions, right? You're allowed, you're a member, you're authorized to view, you're granted access, whatever. You're a bulk admin. What are your roles within the database, right? If at one point you forgot to identify that Latonia needs to be only a regular user and not an admin, and she's going in there and she figures out, oh, I'm an admin, I'm gonna go to town right now, I can do whatever I want, right? And no one really knows it. Again, it's up to the human, which is Latonia. If she knows she has extra access to things, that's not good. She could have access to information to change information accidentally or intentionally, okay? So broken authentication is a huge risk because you need to confirm that everything is working properly so attackers don't grab information. So like I'm going to say for the 50th time, here in Cyber Week, I need you to think of the negatives, right? So up until now, you're looking, okay, I love my project, my capstone is great, blah, blah, blah. Okay, now, and I'm going to make you guys do this tonight, you're going to be thinking, how can someone break into this and how can I make it better? You need to get into the mind of an attacker, which you will tonight. Okay, sensitive data exposure. So this is really just attackers are able to steal or modify or manipulate or sell or do whatever protected data to conduct any sort of fraud. Now, protected data, PII, financial data, that's in parentheses. There's a ton more, okay? This is banking records, prison records, school grades, underage records. There's so many identifiable pieces of information that people just don't even worry about. I'm going to talk about a most recent one, COVID vaccination cards. Everybody's posting a picture of their COVID vaccination card when they get vaccinated. Like, hey, got vaccinated. They're not blurring out anything, okay? Fine, you don't care when people know when you were born. That's okay, not my concern, whatever, right? But that is PII, okay? I want you to understand that your date of birth is PII. That's personally identifiable information. The place that your vaccine was administered, that is personally identifiable information. The type of vaccine that Caitlin received, that is personally identifiable information. If you post something like that to the internet, If you have 200 followers on a private account, okay, whatever, only your followers can see that, fine. If you're on a public account and you're posting a vaccination card on Facebook and it's publicly open to the entire world, think about how many people are going to know where Kyle got vaccinated when she was born, what type of vaccine she got. That's a lot of information that people can place together. That's a lot of things that people are like, so if she was in Utica on the 9th getting vaccinated, but she said that she was out, I don't know, whatever. People put these things together and it's pieces of information about you that you can never retract. If someone took a screenshot of your vaccination card and then Kyle realized, oh shoot, I shouldn't post that, let me delete it. Sorry, it's too freaking late. Someone took a screenshot of your date of birth, your type of vaccine, where you got it, the exact vaccination number, the doctor that administered it. I mean, people don't even blur anything out. And it's just like, do you really care? Like, do you really care if your followers know which doctor did it and where it was done? You know, so post your vaccination card, but blur the important things out, you know, like maybe just keep the type of vaccination, like Pfizer, because fine, 1 million people got the Pfizer vaccine. That's not really that crazy. But if Pfizer vaccines were given at Utica College on the 9th of July at the time frame of 12 to 1 p.m., there are things that can be pieced together there that make it a bit more of a bigger problem. So sensitive data exposure is a huge risk, obviously, because this is crazy information, crazy amounts of information that, if not properly secured, can be stolen and can be grabbed and not only taken, but manipulated. This is how identity theft happens. This is how credit card theft happens. Any type of fraud happens this way because if Jahil has his license information stolen, someone gets a ticket under Jahil's license and it's Brielle who got the ticket, Brielle is not paying for that ticket and it's not going on her record whatsoever. She is clean. So she can be a speed demon and Jahil is getting all the tickets mailed and they're like, well, what's going on? I didn't even drive in the last 6 months. Okay, this is how things like that happen. Also something that I need to mention, organizations need to report breaches within a certain time frame depending on the industry. Let me tell you right now, if you are a person whose information got breached in some sort of big, massive organization and they, for some reason, didn't notify you of that, you are entitled to money. So go after that money, okay? There are legalities, there are literal digital laws in place behind this. If digital information has been breached, and let's say it's like per user amount, right? So if I think if one in a certain amount of users' information was stolen, that makes it a certain percentage, which makes it a big enough exposure that you need to notify people. If it's like, okay, 10 of 10,000 accounts got breached, you don't need to notify every 10,000 person. You just got to let those 10 people know. But if 5,000 of the 10,000 accounts were breached and you don't let those people know, those people are going to be coming at you for millions of dollars. They're called class action lawsuits. You can look them up. They exist. Organizations face fines all the time because they think they can handle the breach before they have to announce it. And then they can't handle it. And then they have to announce it way later. And then it just shows distrust, right? Because customers are not going to trust you if you didn't let me know when you should have. If it's like, really, come on, Bank of America, you didn't tell me when this happened. You're telling me 2 weeks later, like that's not cool. You don't care about me. You only care about your image, right? So then they lose customers, etc., right? So it all works in full circle. Questions so far? I'll take a nice break here. A verbal break, not an actual class break.
Latonya had a question in the chat.
I see. Is the location considered PII because it's with the other info or versus PII on its own? Good question. PII is on its own. It can be one piece of information. So PII, personally identifiable information. Any one piece of information that's linked back to Latonia, okay? If that's your phone number, your data, there is not of your phone number with two different users, right? There's one phone number, one Latonia, right? One date of birth, one Latonia. One, so for example, okay, to your point, for location specifically, just location, technically yes, because it's now identifying where you got your vaccination. For someone who's not from your area, they now know very specifically where you got it. So I'm not from Utica, but if I know specifically you were at the library, I have a very specific address of where you were, not just the town. However, if on your vaccination card it says like Albany, New York, that's very vague, right? That's not personal. However, that could be questioned, so I won't say that you're wrong and I'm right, but more so location would have to be considered PII with those other pieces. However, I'm not going to say location itself is not PII because it definitely can be. So great question. Slack got breached. Wow, of course they did. The big guys always get breached all the time. Your cat typed the decimal, Caitlin. That's funny. Cool. Yeah, Wegmans, Google Plus, Slack, EA Games, the video game company. No, Ubisoft, the video game company. So one of my previous roles, I worked at Data Miner, which I was in a newsroom for cybersecurity news, and basically we needed to be like breaking news, right? And we were based out of New York City, so we were competing with, local news, New York One, etc. And we wanted to be the first organization to break news. So me being on the cyber team, there was barely any cyber news as opposed to like political news. Obviously, there's stuff happening every day, or local news happening every day, but cyber, nothing big is happening so big where we need to alert everyone every day. But Ubisoft got breached, and I saw a tweet come in, and I was like, no way, that's got to be fake. Like, it can't be. That would be huge. Like, that would be like my first huge alert that I would ever put out. And I verified it with a couple other sources. They indeed were breached, and Ubisoft is like a huge gaming company. And they were breached, and I sent my first like red alert out, which was like our first big cyber alert, which was very rare because there were not very many cyber alerts. So but that's a definite career area you can go into if you like that news environment, and breaking news and really looking at what's up to date, what attackers are doing literally right now, right? What are people in Russia doing right now? What are they talking about? What code are they interchanging with each other? Data miner or that type of environment would be the place for you, because it's very, I don't want to say non-technical, because you have to understand the technicalities, but you're not working on the technicalities, right? So you're not actually working with code, but you're seeing the code. So you're seeing, okay, attackers use this code. I got to remember that and share that and spread the information, but you're not working with that code. So something to keep in mind if that's a career area you'd like to go into. All right. More Owasp top 10 security risks, broken access control. This can be really similarly interchanged with broken authentication. So don't beat yourself over the head if you interchange the two. It's really fine. What's broken is broken at the end of the day. So broken access control, though, is very specifically with like users who shouldn't be able to seize very specific pieces of information, not functionality in general. So broken authentication is like, okay, this button is not working on the site, we have to fix it, right? It's not authenticating on the back end, something needs to happen there. Broken access control is like, hey, Alice is supposed to have access to this database. She doesn't have access to it. what's her permission? What's the role? Why is that not happening? So if that's not done correctly and there's not proper role management, identity management, access management in place, attackers are easily able to exploit these flaws to access elevated functionality, right? So if Latonia is just a regular user, she gets access to Caitlin's account, who's an admin. She's going to be doing some crazy things that she should not have access to be doing, right? And as you know, admins can do crazy damage, right? You basically own everything as an admin, right? You can delete, modify, add, whatever. If we don't want Latonia having admin access, we need to make sure that we have properly identified what access we want Latonia to have for the duration, for her entire employment, for 6 months. What are we doing here? Are we going to revisit this? It needs to be documented. Now, I also just want to give a quick touch base on documentation. That's a huge part of cybersecurity, and it's not touched on enough. And I need you all to take note of this. I need you to remember this because it's important. Anyone can have security protocols in their head. That's totally fine. But if you're coming to a time where you need to be audited, or you need to check logs, or you need to get to the bottom of something, right? If it's not documented, it didn't exist. I'm telling you that right now. Okay? We're going to talk about log retention. We'll talk about that again then. If you don't have the logs, or if you don't have anyone monitoring the logs or making sense of that information, it's like you didn't even have logs. So don't talk to me about your logs. All right? I've said that to companies straight up before. A company that was my client was like, oh, we need you to get to the bottom of this Emotet infection. And I was like, okay, send me all the logs you have, etc. They're like, oh, well, we only have logs from every day. We clear them at the end of the day. So the only logs I have are from this morning until right now. And I'm like, okay, that's great. But if whatever happened on this device happened before this morning, which 99% of the time it did, I can't do anything with those logs. So it's like, don't even bother sending them to me because I can't do anything with them. And you as a security analyst or any sort of analyst in the security area, you need to understand that if you don't have information, if you can't do anything with it, say that straight up because you're going to be saving people a lot of time. Don't waste your own time trying to dig down a rabbit hole. If you simply don't have the facts, you don't have the facts. Technology is not just going to create in front of you and magically be there and fill in all the blanks, right? You have the technology to try to trace back to the root of a problem. If whatever technology is given to you, you can't find it, you can't find it. You've got to be able to let go. And I'll say this again, when I worked on a forensic team, there are times where I worked 6 to 8 weeks with a co-analyst on a case, and we couldn't get to the root cause. We could not find how the attacker got in, could not find where that executable came from. We couldn't. They had all the information. They had the logs. They had the history. They had the cache, everything. We just couldn't find a probable solution. Simply, you need to be okay with being like, I'm sorry, we cannot find it. At this point, our conclusion is inconclusive. Sorry, these are the facts that we have. This is what we can tell you at this time. That's it. And it's your job to tell them that, right? If you can't find it, they're not going to read your mind. You got to tell them, we've looked at everything and we simply cannot find it. And that can be hard for some people. So a lot of my team members in the forensic space ended up leaving the team after like 2 to 3 weeks after working in that environment because it can get very frustrating. It can get very, pressurizing and stressful because it's like, okay, where do I find this? And you can't find it. And then if you want to give someone else to look at it, someone else can look at it with a different pair of eyes. That's fine. But they're looking at it completely differently than you did. So now you have to try to understand, all right, how did Kyle do this? Where did they start from? Blah, 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 right? So sometimes it's okay to just close the door on something if you don't know it. But that's access control. Now, cross-site scripting, this is a huge example especially pertinent to you guys because you worked with HTML. I know you did. I checked the syllabus. So I know that you understand HTML. Cross-site scripting is a piece of code written in HTML. It's a script in HTML. We're going to look at some examples right now. But basically, these flaws occur whenever an application has some sort of data allowance without validating that. So validation means, for example, if you're retrieving a number input from a user, is that a string? Is that a float? What type of number is that? What should we be expecting? Or are you just expecting anything from the user? I don't care what they put in there, whatever, right? You could, but then you're not thinking about the what ifs. You're not thinking about what happens if they enter a letter then? What happens then, right? The same thing, if you don't validate it, what happens if an attacker exploits that now? Same thing, same exact thing, right? So same thing if you're asking the user enter an email address and you're trying to validate that it has an @ symbol somewhere in there, right? An attacker can be like, all right, I got this. Let me create a little script, make sure I add an @ in the comments so this field is recognized. Beautiful, I got in. If that's your only sort of validation, right? Think about that. So you as a coder and you as a programmer, you need to think when you're creating your applications, whether they're web applications, mobile applications, whatever, when you're thinking about any sort of user input, user intake, how are you validating that? Any sort of form information, button information, what are the what ifs? What are your try and accept statements say? What are your if else statements say? What have you catered for those what if situations? Because the best application has catered for most scenarios, and that's a lot of work. That's a lot of work because you got to be like, okay, if this happens, then this. If this happens, then this. If there can be a lot of what ifs, right? The more you do that, the more you go through those steps, the better that is for you on a security standpoint. Now, on the flip side, you can see why a lot of people are like, oh, I'm so lazy, it's fine, whatever. Like, no one's going to do anything, it's okay, right? When you trust people, / when you get lazy in going those extra steps, it's not secure that way. It's less secure that way, right? Anything that you take that extra time to harden, to secure, to build, obviously it's going to be fruitful in the long run. It'll make sense for you. So let me come out of this so I can share this link with you. I'm going to share this in the chat. Here we go again. Can't find the chat when I just, oh, there it is. All right. Jahil, yes, they can also inject code into the program exactly by using the script tag. If you look at these examples, you'll see that. So I want you guys to take a look at the link I just dropped in the chat. Take about 5-ish minutes and really try to understand cross-site scripting, but also look at the examples a little deeper in the article and take a look at how that could potentially affect your application or your site, or really just think, oh, wow, that's how easy it is to, cross-site script. Oh my gosh, I can go do this, right? So take a couple minutes until around, let's say 8 minutes, 6:15 or so, roughly, and take a look at that and let me know your thoughts afterwards. Hey, by the way, there's a user in here 500477. Can you just tell me who you are? If not, we're just going to bump you.
That's a sign-in code. That's the sign-in code for class.
Yeah, I thought that was weird too. I just wanted to know like if anybody was on more than one device, like trying to listen on one and watch on another one. There's a couple people who I know like to do that. If you are and you could change the name, that would be great. If not, you're just gonna get booted out, and I'm sorry, but I'm not sorry. So
We never sorry. This is security. That is unsafe. Yeah, I think just boot them. And
right.
if they reveal themselves, they can.
Cool. Yeah. Goodbye. All right.
Perfect. Okay. Cool. Thanks for letting us know, Susan. All right, just like 1 or 2 minutes more looking through this article, then we'll continue. Ariel, so that's a good question. So cross-site scripting, you can inject it within a Chrome extension. It would depend. So there are 2 options there. You could just inject it directly into the HTML of the actual site, which is the preferred way. Or when a Chrome extension is concerned, you can either create a malicious extension and then run that in the browser, which would do the same job, or when you're calling in your HTML code, when you're referencing the Chrome extension, you could then inject some malicious code there. So it depends on whatever you want to do. Honestly, if it's any type of HTML code, anywhere, you can inject something malicious in there, no matter what it's pointed to. If it's something that's pointing to something to execute an action, you can interject that. So hopefully that answers your question, Ariel. Perfect. Okie doke. So we're gonna move on. Well, actually, what do we think about cross-site scripting? What are our thoughts about going through that? Those examples, they're pretty simple. How do we feel about them? Scary and tiresome. Touche. It's true, because they're not that they're not that challenging. I mean, it's not like it's okay, oh my God, this is a whole program of, you know, a ton of lines. It's 1 or 2 lines of code that are pretty easy to decipher and can be looked at as clean code as well, but just they're taken maliciously. So cool. All right, next, insufficient logging and monitoring. So we talked about this at length multiple times, but this is a huge risk. It allows attackers to further attack systems, maintain that persistence, and pivot around to more systems on the network because it prevents professionals from finding the root cause to an attack. Okay, so if you don't have enough logs, you don't have proper monitoring, you don't have any of that, you're disallowing professionals to be able to gather all of the information to be able to make that assumption, to be able to get to the solution set. So I'm going to share, or Caitlin's going to share the link in the chat with you just regarding insufficient logging, just from another source, so you can kind of see what that looks like, see the risk, etc. And I'll take about 3-ish minutes or so, look through that, and then we'll move on. Okie doke. So you can see that, and we've talked about this before, so I won't take a long time to kind of go through this, but you can see how the lack of information, the lack of logs, the lack of that data retention can really put folks at a disadvantage to be able to find the root cause to an issue. So really just think about that and keep that in mind when working at your future organization, when working on future teams. If you're on a security team and it's like, hey, I see that we're not implementing log retention, maybe we should do that to prevent X, Y, and Z. Again, your manager is not going to be like, hey, that's a dumb idea. Your manager might say something like, hey, we don't have log retention in our budget right now. Let's talk about working it in for next quarter. Beautiful, yes. But bridge those conversations and really start to have them. Cool. All right. I'm not sure if these are the same groups, but actually, Caitlin has created breakout groups. So I think we were talking in the beginning that everyone should be forced into them. So what we're going to do before I'll have Caitlin explain is I want you to think of your capstone project. So yes, you are going to be working in a group, but still you need to be thinking about your own projects. You're working in a group to bounce ideas off each other, but you need to have your own organic ideas here, okay? Based on the Owasp top 10 web application security risks, which are at this link, which I'll drop in the chat if you don't have it, or Caitlin can drop that, the Owasp top 10 list. But how do you think an attacker would be able to exploit your application? So we went through all 10. You know what the 10 are. We went through 6 in good depth. What do you think? How do you think an attacker would be able to attack yours? So I need you to think about your capstone project, think about what you're doing, everything that you've created, and think about it. How can an attacker potentially exploit that? This is not like, oh my God, I'm a horrible coder. What did I do? No, this is why the cybersecurity module is at the end. It's so you can create that security now that you have everything else there. You want to now lock it in, okay? So I want you to work in your group, bounce ideas off each other, and come up with a list of 3 risks for your specific capstone project, okay? They have to be obviously one of the 10 from the OWASP top 10. And you also need to list why that's a risk. So you can't just say that the risk is broken authentication. Tell me why, where on your site. And we'll talk about this. I don't want you to tell me how you're going to fix it, because that's what the latter half of tonight is for. But I need you to identify those 3 risks. Tell me why it's a risk. Touch base with your group, help each other out, bounce ideas off each other, and we'll come back. So I think I want to give 20 minutes to do this. We'll see how we're feeling after. If you guys tell me you're done in 10 minutes, capiche. If you need 25 minutes, we'll do that too. But let's start with about 20 minutes. And Caitlin's going to drop you guys in your breakout rooms. Before she does that, any questions on what I'm asking of you guys? You each need to have it written down, whether that's in a Word document, in a Slack channel to yourself. Have it written down. This is not something that's in your head. You're not like, okay, here are my risks, because we're going to take the controls that we learned tonight, and you actually need to control your application and harden it. So I need you to write this down, and actually, it doesn't need to be crazy fancy, just bullets are fine. But 3 risks, tell me why they're a risk, touch base with your group members, and ask us if you have any questions. 20 minutes on the clock. Caitlin, you can drop them in. Thank you.
Oops. All right. Did you want me to just like leave it open time-wise and we can count down ourselves? Or do you want them to auto close after a certain amount of time?
How would we be able to notify students if like I want them to come back? How can we do that? So how about just auto do it for 6:50 or for 25 minutes? 25.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
Okay. Just to be on the safe side.
Yep. And then it'll notify everybody and there'll be like a 60-second countdown. And that's it.
Yeah, I think that's safe. That's a good time to work on this. Yeah, I think that's good.
Okay. Just make sure. Cool. Okay.
Yep, take your time.
All right. Here we go.
All right. See you guys back here. Good luck.
There are 3 rooms of 4, Anissa. Some people are not in the program anymore. Some people, cool. You know, just things happen. So, and some folks, I know Sarah told me she lost internet. So she's not on, but she's trying to watch on YouTube, like on her phone.
Okay, cool. I see Jahil is still here. Was he placed in a group?
He was.
Okay, I wonder, maybe he'll get it.
He probably just didn't accept yet.
Oh, yeah, okay, cool.
But he was in a group.
Oh, nice. I can see all the rooms. Cool.
Oh, can you?
Yeah. On the bottom and more, it says breakout rooms, and I can see them. Nice.
It's fun.
Cool. All right.
I believe.
Oh, we could broadcast the message to all too, so that's good to know.
Oh, yep. See,
Cool.
it's hard to, use it like so little. Like,
yeah, I bet. So
I don't like all the features, but it's pretty cool.
Yeah. Okay, so would you say like 25 minutes is a good amount? How instructors normally do it? Because I don't want to give like less.
I would say it's good. What happened last time is like when I tried it, we learned that I was like giving them like 5 minutes, but it took time for them all to get into the room, and then it took time for them to like get their material together, and then it took time to, and like by the time they were actually talking, they had like 30 seconds.
Oh,
So
okay.
it's good to have like a buffer almost to just like get started. And then but yeah, that worked well. Like after we figured that out, like that was something like I didn't even think about, like, oh, it might take time to like
transition.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then that's really the only like weird thing that we didn't account for. But I think otherwise, like, I think that's a good amount of time. They were actually, when they came back, I put them back in the breakout room after they had come back because they really wanted to keep talking about stuff.
Aww.
So like, I think it's going to be a good amount of time. They can have like really good discussions that way.
Yeah.
Like sometimes too short, and then like not everybody can talk or.
Exactly. And this way we're not like monitoring discussion, so they can really go through the Owasp top 10, like really look at it, apply it to themselves, because tonight, the second half tonight, as you see in the slides, we're going to go through the controls, but tomorrow it'll be really specifically like how to really secure your specific project. So tonight's exercise will really help with that. So I think taking the time should be good, I hope.
Yes. And I know it's nice for them too to talk like off being recorded and off.
Yes. Yeah.
Whatever. So I feel that.
Yeah, me too. So I think I'm gonna like have some dinner now.
Yeah, go for it. I'll probably like be here, but
sure. Yeah, Slack me if you need anything, but I'll let me know if any questions come up, but I have my windows open, so I'll see if anything pops up.
Cool.
All right, see you later.
Yep.
All right, welcome back. Cool. Did you guys have a good conversation with each other? I hope you did. I'll wait for everyone to chime back in. But we're going to take the next couple minutes to kind of go through what your findings were. And I really want to hear, at least from majority of you, if not all of you, what your top priority risk is. So I know I told you to find 3 for your own application, but based on conversations with each other, and kind of seeing those risk factors, I just want to hear. So for everyone just joining back in, really what we're going to do right now for 5 minutes is I just want to hear, from hopefully everyone. We're going to play the volunteer game. I hope everyone volunteers, please. If not, I'll just start calling people on my squares, but no pressure. I just want to hear, based on yesterday and today, what are those risk areas that you really think, especially that top area that you think you personally need to work on. You don't need to tell me why. You can be really concise, but would anyone like to go first?
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yes, Jahil, go ahead.
Oh, I was seeing if I was going to be unmuted or not.
Okay.
Anyways, yeah. So my vulnerabilities, I guess, for my game will be probably authentication. Because so basically what we did last week with Nathan, that's what I need to do. I need to have tokens when I'm sending in, so I can have control of who's sending what and capturing that. Because I'm using a different program.
Okay.
To prototype the game, and I'm going to be using a lot of HTTP requests back and forth.
There you go. So authentication is very important. Nice. Good.
Yeah.
So just really be clear when you're creating those requests, and we'll talk about those tomorrow very specifically, but really think about those potential attacks that could happen and play that ear when writing that. Cool. I see some hands raised, which I love. So I'll go with Phobelia because you're just first on my screen. Tell me what you got.
Okay. My site is very basic because I'm doing my artist portfolio, but my concern is how to protect the images, my personal images and the products that are on my portfolio, even though at this point I'm not selling anything. I'm not doing an e-commerce. It's just for display only.
Exactly. So that's a good question. I think so. There's 2 parts there. There's one, if they're your original images, how do you prevent people from downloading them from your site? But also 2, how do you ensure that people viewing your site know that those are your images, your original work? It's not grabbed anyone. So we'll be talking about copywriting, and I think that'll be a huge portion for you, whether that's in your footer, in your comments or whatever. But you can also watermark images and trademark. We'll talk about all of that tomorrow. Okay. But I think that's great analysis to think of, so you know what you need. We just have to figure out how to get there.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. That's great. Susan?
Sure. I mean, right, like my website is static, but it does have a database, even though all the info is publicly available. Nothing is secret or proprietary or anything like that. But, I still wouldn't want it to be manipulated, so that I wouldn't want to be manipulated and then have my website be different than what I intend it to be. So I think for me, maybe the database protections would be the main thing for me to be concerned about.
Good. And database protections, I think that should be everyone's concern. If not, and I don't blame you if it's not your top concern, because there's other things going on. However, I'm sure that a lot of you, maybe half of you on your applications, have some sort of data reception or data retrieval or something, which means that your information will qualify as a database, which means you need to secure it, right? Any sort of application, prompt, request, anything that's accepting data from an end user, that is a housing data. Anything that houses data is a database by definition, whether you like it or not. So you've got to lock that down. You've got to secure it. So thank you for bringing that up, Susan. That's great. Dominique, what do you have?
I would say, because again, I don't have anything like serious on my capstone that needs to be stolen or anything.
Yeah.
But for me, mine is using components with known vulnerabilities. I have downloaded a lot of libraries, a lot of frameworks and different modules just to play around with my capstone. And I really didn't think about, am I downloading decoys? Am I downloading the real thing? Is there anything within these folders that could like compromise my capstone for later on for a hostile takeover for my server? So that's something I'm gonna have to really consider and look into. And yeah.
No, that's awesome. That's great. And I'm glad you guys really took this assignment to heart. That's really special to me because, and I mean that seriously, because the point of this really was for you to look intrinsically, look at the work that you have done in the past 11 weeks. Tell me how you can lock it down. That's what we're talking about because your work is amazing. I know it is, right? But you don't want people to grab it. You don't want people to steal it. You don't want people to break it. And you can prevent that and you can help prevent it. So I'm so glad we're going through this. This is great. Makes me happy. Shy, I see your hands up. You go next.
Hi.
Hello.
Since I'll be using APIs,
Mm-hmm.
so for me, sensitive data exposure, API private versus public, that's important because the API will be exposed, and also, like in my case, it's SendGrid. So if it's private or exposed, they will shut down the service. They will block my account. The other thing I think that applies to me is cross-site scripting. Like I will be using HTML and JavaScript, like JavaScript events on click and submit, and also insufficient logging and monitoring. I think that's something, that I should pay attention to.
Totally. That's great. I love it. And insufficient logging and monitoring, I will say that is more of a, like, because you can create an application and it wouldn't really matter if you have your logs retained because at this point it's just proactive, right? So you're retaining your logs, you're looking at it, taking a look at alerts, you're making sense of them, which is wonderful, but there's not really any action you can take unless there's an attack or unless there's something in which you need to go back and grab those logs. Then it's perfect. So log retention is that go-to in that what if scenario. It's like, well, what if something bad happens? Logs is your answer. So whether you're implementing log retention at an organization or making sure that you tell clients to retain logs, whatever, make sure that that's, like Shah said, properly communicated because it's very important. Cool. Anyone else want to share? If not, it's okay. I had a good chunk go, so I'm not going to force anyone to go, but I'm totally open if anyone else would like to let me know what they have.
So I would say that my biggest risk, I feel like, is the SQL injection. I have forms on my page that I'm trying to set up the authorization on, which the broken authentication is also a risk. But the forms submit everything to my database, so that could definitely be a problem.
Totally. Yeah. So the keys are just validating, locking that down, and authorizing. Make sure you've got roles assigned if possible, but least required access, right? So you're not giving everyone admin. You're giving people view only to start. We can work up from there, but all I need is for you to see this for now. I don't need to edit it, work with it, whatever, and then we can go from there. That's great. Cool. Ariel, you have your hand up. You can be my last person to go.
I actually had a question.
Oh, sure. Go ahead. Perfect.
I have, for example, on my section of user reviews where they're inputting their first name and their email address. Okay. Would that be considered broken access control if that were to be manipulated in some way? Or would that be considered like a database, a table issue? Like, where does that fall exactly?
So I'm going to answer that in a matter of priority because it technically falls in both of those categories. But in priority level wise, your database is going to be what you want to lock down first. because that's going to be the majority of where things are housed. So your broken access control and your broken authentication, yeah, of course, that's a big one, but not as important as your database, because the broken access control is that one time click is broken, whatever. But the database, if that's not locked down, that's all of that data that's grabbed. So in my mind, I would look at that in a level of priority, but I would have to take a look at your actual project and make that better assumption. But right now, verbally, I would probably say focus on database security first. Does that answer your question, Ariel? Oh, prioritize. Perfect. Got it. Yes, exactly. And that's a good point too. I do want to just bring that up, because let me just be very clear that all of you can go through right now and you can tell me, each of these 10 security risks apply to my application. Where do I start? I don't know what to do first. I mean, they all are important. What do I do? That's where prioritization comes in. It's up to you as the application owner, the application creator, to, if you don't understand any of these controls, you look them up. You look at videos, you look at the necessity, that what required parameters come within that control. So then you, as the application owner, you're now able to prioritize. You can make an educated assumption. Listen, my form, it's only one button really, but my database, I've got about 15 users entering data there a day. I want to focus my efforts there first, and then we'll see next after that. So prioritization is very, very key, very important, and can often be the most challenging step, because you're presented with 15 problems, right? What on earth do you do? What do you do first, right? Where do you even begin? That can be very daunting. So prioritizing helps in understanding. You can't prioritize something you don't understand. That's what I tell myself. If I'm ever presented with a problem which I have to rank these, and if there's one of them that I don't know, I got to go make sure that I know it, because if I don't know it, I'm going to incorrectly rank it, right? So great point on prioritization. I just wanted to say that. All right, cool. We've been going at it for the full time basically, so we're gonna do a good 15-minute break now. So probably do 18 minutes. So I'll see you guys back here 7:20, and then we'll run the rest of class through with lecture on defense mechanisms for the rest of the night and see what we get through, and pick up tomorrow where we leave off. But break until 7:20. I'll see you guys back then. All right, we are back. Share my screen. All right. Okay. Cool. Welcome back. We're going to get right into terminology, defense mechanisms. We're going to just start there, see where we end up at the end of class tonight, and then we will resume and pick up where we left off tomorrow, and then get into the rest of things. So first, I just want to identify to you guys the difference between privacy, security, and ethics. 2 reasons I want to do this. 1, because they are all different. And 2, because if you're ever choosing a role that you want to go into or an area that you want to go into, this will help you kind of differentiate that. Do you want to go into the area of privacy, security, ethics, or which area intrigues you the most? So, privacy itself, think about it as literally the state of being free from being observed. Okay, so when we think about someone acting privately on the web and their privacy being protected, that's simply meaning that they are not being observed or bothered by others. Whatever they're doing is safe and private, okay? By definition. Security is the state of being free from any danger or threat. Okay, this is you as a user or your device being secured. It is different than being private. If you say, yeah, my device is secure. Oh, but is it private? Yeah, it's the same thing. No, it's not. Privacy has something to do with observation, surveillance, monitoring, botheration, things like that. Security is simply threat-free. The higher the secure environment is, the lower the threats you have, of course. You cannot have a secure environment if it's riddled with 50 threats a day. Obviously, that's the least secure environment. And now, ethically, you've got moral principles that govern a person's behavior or conduction of an activity. Now, why is this being brought up right now? Why am I saying this to you? Because they're all different, as you can see by definition, but also ethically, it all boils down to the human, all right? Ethics and morals, a computer doesn't have that. A program doesn't have morals, okay? So you cannot tell me that the application that you wrote is an empathetic, happy program. You have no idea. There is no trust. There is no safety. There is no, you cannot tell me any morals of your program. You can tell me that my program does X, Y, and Z factually, sure. This is where that human aspect come in, ethically. Now, this goes down to ethics. Let's relate this back to access management, for example. If Kyle is an administrator and Brielle is just a regular user, on accident, Brielle, for some reason, was granted administrator access on complete accident. She is now able to do whatever she wants. Ability is different than action. That's where ethics and morals come in. Do you see what I'm saying? Now, the ability to do something, there's 2 ways you can do. You can go tell the security team or upper management, hey, I'm seeing that I have access to like scan times here in the security environment and I can end the processes. I feel like I shouldn't be seeing that. Maybe you should take a look at that. You don't touch a thing. You don't look at things you're not supposed to. That's ethics. That's morals. Technology doesn't teach you that. this boot camp is not going to teach you ethics, right? That's you as a person. So it's very important to understand that there are routes you can take. The other opposing route to that is you can go end the scans, change them around, screw with people because you feel like being funny. You don't tell anyone, you pretend it never happened, you just abuse your power. There's no ethics there. That's zero moral behavior. That's immoral behavior, right? But that's not technology's fault. That is you as the human. That's the user who's conducting those actions. So remember that ability is different than acting on those abilities. So keep that in mind. All right, basic terminology, a hacker. I'm sure everyone in this room has heard of this word, and it's probably like, oh, cybersecurity is just filled with hackers, right? That's all we are. Some of us are hackers for sure. So a hacker is literally meant to someone who just masters the inner workings and procedures and protocols and parameters of computer hardware and software in an effort to better understand them. Okay? Now, as I talk about 50,000 times, you can't protect against something that you don't understand. Therefore, there are good hackers and there are bad hackers. Let me repeat. There are good hackers and there are bad hackers. The best of hackers knows what the worst of hackers can do. That's because you need to know what to protect against. If you have no idea what Brielle, the level 10 hacker, is up to, how on earth is Phobelia going to defend against it? She doesn't even know what is coming her way, right? So a hacker in its definitions is really just an individual who understands and manipulates and really gets the ins and outs of how something works to the best of your ability and to the best of the ability of that technology. Today, the word hacker is used to describe an individual who gains unauthorized access to a system. Now, we're going to talk about the different types of hackers, etc., but just understand that don't go run around and using the word, yeah, I'm a hacker, or yeah, cybersecurity, that's just filled with hackers, right? Not really. Not everyone in cybersecurity is a hacker, actually. You can just be a regular analyst. It doesn't mean you're a hacker. It doesn't mean you go that extra step and understand how the programs work, right? You can be, anyone here can be a hacker. Maybe you've never worked a day in a cybersecurity job in your life, and you can go manipulate the ins and outs of a computer and refer to yourself as a hacker. I promise you, you can do that. So break the stigma that a hacker has to be this person with 50 years of experience who is some magician who knows the wizard. No, it's just understanding the ins and outs and really how to work them. Now, hacker categories. White hat hacker is a good hacker, ethical hacker, right? So ethical hacking is the reason I got into cybersecurity. That was the most intriguing thing to me because I, previously to studying in school, in college, I had only thought that hackers were negative. So I was like, what are you saying? There are good hackers? That's what? That didn't make sense to me. But there are differences. There's a white hat hacker. Now, these are security experts that are hired by organizations to try to break in. Okay, my job is to literally try to break in. A local bank hired me to do this, and it was a team of 3 of us. And I was the social engineer, so I had to do the social aspect, and the other 2 guys were the actual, like, get into the technical vulnerabilities. So my job was I had to go try to get through the front desk without ever showing a badge. So it was like, this was in New York City, and it was like a turnstile. So you couldn't get through unless your badge unlocked the turnstile to get through. And there's security guards there. And so they boasted to all of their clients they have state-of-the-art physical security and no one will ever get in their building and blah, blah, blah. So I pull the social card. I'm like, oh my God, I'm running late to a meeting. I pretend I'm really busy, got my briefcase, everything ready to go. And I'm like, I'm running late. I'm meeting with X, Y, and Z. And I had researched all this previously. I listed a name and I'm meeting with them and I'm running late. I forgot my badge. It's in my car. I can tell you exactly where it is. I just misplaced it. Can you write my name down? I'll come down in a second and verify. I'm just really late right now. And after a couple minutes, he let me go without even showing a badge. Didn't even do it. He didn't take any other form of ID, anything, nothing. I did not need a badge for that bank to enter. He just let me go because I work the system. So they failed. They failed that penetration test because I successfully penetrated. So that's a penetration test, which we'll talk about. And I passed, they failed because I got through without authenticating, right? My badge was the authenticator. I didn't have a badge, so I made it through. So that's a good hacker. So I'm not there to try to get in and steal. I'm there to try to get in to tell them, hey, I got in. Work on fixing that because someone actually bad can actually get in, right? That's the good, that's the ethical portion of it. So now we've got black hat hackers. So obviously white, opposite of white is black. Black hat hacker, that's a group or an individual that can cause damage, steal data, or compromise privacy. Okay? This is a bad hacker. So this is not someone who is there for good, okay? Early in my career, I got very confused with the difference between these two. And I was like, oh, you're a black hat. That's great. Yeah, and it's not. So that's a negative thing, okay? So just think of it as white hat. I think of white hat as like a chef, and I think of chefs to be like innocent people. So that's why I think of this as like you're a good, hacker. That's how my brain works. But a black hat hacker, you're there to cause damage. You're there to steal. You're there to try to break in and take the information. You're not there to just break in to educate. You're there for negative reasons, okay? To compromise the privacy. Now, there's also something called a gray hat hacker, which you don't really see many of these around, but this is really like they're kind of, they do their own thing. So they don't really work for people, work for a company. They call themselves a hacker. They may be doing some illegal stuff. They may have an intent that's positive to help people. No one really knows what they do, so they just kind of label themselves as a little bit of both. They educate. They could potentially do some really illegal, questionable stuff. Maybe they did in the past. Maybe they changed. Who knows? But I'm sure if you did a quick Google search to like famous gray hat hackers, a couple names will ring a bell. Any questions on any of this before we move on? All right. Now, a couple other things I'm going to talk about. First, I'm going to show you the entire screen because I want to explain the difference between a vulnerability and an exploit. Now, there is a very clear difference. Again, they're not the same thing, and risk is something else. So if I don't have it written down here, do not assume they're the same thing, okay? Vulnerability is very clearly, it's just a weakness. It is simply identification of a weakness, okay? Like we talked about, the Owasp top 10, those are security vulnerabilities, right? Those are just potentials, right? They're just things that exist that make the system weak, okay? If acted upon, AKA exploited, then there's problems. There's ultimate damage there. Okay? If exploited, that means you're taking advantage of those existing vulnerabilities. Remember, vulnerabilities are perfectly okay to exist in their own little world, and nothing will happen if no one ever acts on them because they're just living, right? There's just something there. Let's say you've got a malicious executable in your downloads folder, right? If that is a malicious executable and it's not meant to do anything unless you physically double click and open it, it'll just sit there. It's a vulnerability. It detects that it's there, but unless you actually double click and open it, that's when it gets exploited. So understand that the exploit is taking advantage of that said vulnerability. Now, because of all of this potential vulnerability, that leads to a lot of risk. Because there's potential of vulnerabilities being exploited, that identifies our risk levels. So if you've got a low amount of vulnerabilities, ultimately you've got a lower risk level because you've got less chance of it being exploited. So ultimately you've got lower vulnerability or lower risk. However, if you've got an environment fiddled with 50 vulnerabilities, right? There's much higher of a chance that one of those are going to be exploited, which means the risk for your data is much higher. Are we getting how all those things interconnect? Cool. Now, a zero-day exploit, zero-day attack is exactly what it sounds like. It's taking advantage of an undiscovered vulnerability before the developer, the software developer, even knows it exists. So this is immediate, okay? A zero-day attack is sitting on the system waiting for a vulnerability to show up, and it will go ahead and hit that instantly. So the engineers, log analysis, any type of analyst, you have no time to react because it's an instantaneous attack. Because it detects any sort of vulnerability in the system, it happens, it triggers the attack instantly, leaving the end user, the admin, zero time, literally, to protect and to defend. So at that point, all you have to do is react. You cannot proactively protect yourself because it already happened. Zero-day exploits are, if not the worst attack potentially, and I'm not being biased, it's literally because they are designed to take you down instantly. That's the point, right? They're very strategic, very smart. So someone behind a zero-day attack has to have been monitoring you for a long time, monitoring your organization, perhaps left some clues that you just missed, and then they're going for their time to attack. When that perfect vulnerability strikes, they are attacking, ruthlessly. And they're rare to occur because usually people protect sites and you can pretty much prevent them. I don't want to say fully, but they're pretty rare. I haven't seen very many in my time. But when they do happen, I can tell you that it's all hands on deck, and it's completely isolate that network, that machine from your network instantaneously. You've got to get that away from anything else that it touches because it's going to be disastrous. So just keep that in mind when you hear zero-day, when you see vulnerabilities protecting against zero-day exploits. That's something that should trigger, oh, I should be on that. That's important. I got to check that out. So remember that malicious and determined intruders may only use one technique. Okay, so let's say they're just brute force attacking and they're just trying to guess passwords and they're attacking. That's all they're doing. They're not touching your database. They don't care about access rights. All they want to do is get passwords, right? Now, let's say you've been monitoring these attackers for months, let's say 3-4 months. So you as an analyst, you know all their brute force attempts are faking or failing, but you know they're happening, but you're just looking at them, but nothing's happening because they're failing and you're protecting against it, right? This allows them to leave you off guard because now you're like, okay, I'm looking at passwords. I'm looking in this one spot for this attacker. Now this attacker is going to catch you off guard with some out of the blue attack and hit you from behind, and you would not have known to expect it. So don't ever get into a period of regularity like, oh, I see that Russia seems to be spitting out a lot of malware in email, so I'm going to be looking only at email. No. Things can be unpredictable. The threat environment changes daily, so you have to be on the lookout. You always have to be playing on edge and really be aware of that stuff. Questions before we move on? Cool. Yesterday we talked about a honeypot, so I just want to kind of talk about that a little deeper. A honeypot that's the true definition. I know it's funny, but it's actually a decoy system that's purposely vulnerable. Okay, so software engineers create it, analysts create it, whatever. It's literally meant to be like, oh, this is such easy bait. Let me just go attack it and try to break in, right? It's purposely created that way. It's designed to fool hackers, so that's easy bait for them. Obviously, a hacker is going to see something so easy, they're of course going to try to break in, but that's what I want. I want the hacker to break in so I can learn about the hacker. I can get information about my attacker's location, my attacker's vector, my attacker's, attack quantity, whatever. Anything like that can be helpful. You've now created this fake environment that the attacker has no clue that you did intentionally, because they thought they're in, but they're not actually in. They're in a fake environment that you're completely controlling. So you're the upper hand there, but they don't know that. So that's a honeypot. Now, I always bring it back to the human. I always do it. Human risks. The most important defense against that social engineering aspect is training. We talked about this, but I'm going to say it again. User training and employee training is so important. You cannot only go through cybersecurity training once in your life and you're good to go. It doesn't make sense. It just doesn't make sense. You need to be aware of what's going on, the threat landscape, current risk factors, current threats, current top vulnerabilities, right? There's also a human risk called an insider threat. This is usually known as a disgruntled employee who usually is, either has a warning with HR or is pissed at upper management and wants to get back and is planning on leaving and is planning some malicious activities. This is called an insider threat. This usually happens on the technology team or some highly technical person with some sort of administrative access. And what they do is they utilize their access. They know they're going to quit or they're going to just leave in like a week or so. So they take that week and they, grab all the information they want to, email stuff to themselves, take all of that company, corporate, confidential information, and they're an administrator, so no one's going to ask twice. They have full access to it. No one cares, right? And everyone's like, oh yeah, I trust Latonia. She wouldn't do anything. It's fine, whatever, right? Especially if, let's say, an employee gives their 2 weeks, or if a manager is like, all right, Caitlin, we're not really happy with what you're doing, but we're not going to fire you on the spot. So finish out your time here in a week or two and then figure out your next steps, right? Caitlin's pissed. Caitlin's like, but I love it here. I don't know what you're talking about. So I'm going to take everything that you taught me and I'm going to go start my own business and take that. So she's going to download all the financial records, all of the budgeting information, all of that stuff. She's an admin. She can do it. No one's going to get alerted. It's not going to be a red flag, and she's still an employee. That's why she's an insider threat. That's not anyone on the outside getting in, breaking and stealing. That's our very own Caitlin. Can you imagine? She looks so innocent, right? But seriously, don't ever assume that you know someone that you're working with, okay? Because anyone can be an insider threat. Anyone can be an insider threat. And remember, this goes down to the ethics as well, okay? This goes down to, okay, when I'm leaving a company, what's ethical of me to do right now? Do I forward all my client data to myself? Because that could be useful in the future. Why not, right? That's not my information to share with myself. That's company information that was sent to my company email. There is no reason for me to forward that to my personal email when I'm leaving this company, right? That goes down to ethics. No one's going to know if Kyle forwarded that client spreadsheet to herself, right? Or shared a copy on her desktop and forwarded that to herself, right? You are going to know that, Kyle. You're going to know that in your heart. Oh, shoot. I took that, shouldn't have taken it, but I did. That's ethics. That's not up to the computer. That's not up to technology. That's up to you. So some measures that are there to reduce those insider threats are background checks for new hires. So a lot of us wonder, oh my God, this is such a simple analyst role. Why do they need to do a background check? This is why, because we got to make sure that you don't have a history of stealing company data, because if you do, I don't know if we would want to hire you. That's a bit of a red flag, right? The other simple task to complete to protect anything from happening is least privilege. Give someone, when they first join a company, the least amount of access that they need to do their job. So if Brielle joins the company day one, today is August 17th, and let's say she joins the company as a system administrator, right? Do you think Brielle gets administrator access on today, August 17th? No, that's a no. It doesn't matter if you were hired as a system administrator. There are things you need to go through, whether that's training, orientation, onboarding, shadowing someone, going through a 3-month probationary period. They have to make sure they trust you. You will never get admin rights alone unless someone's monitoring that severely, or it's locked down admin rights or monitored or whatever. But you need to be starting with that minimal level of access to do your job, and then you can get increased, like the next bullet says, based on that behavior. I've got to know that I can trust Phobelia. She's been seeing all this financial records. I haven't seen anything tampered with. All right, I mean, I think she's ready to go admin now. I think I can trust her. DLP, data loss prevention. This is, we'll talk about this a little more tomorrow, actually, so I'm going to skip this. These are just for other like solution sets that we can discover, so I'll talk about that tomorrow. So just skip that for now. All right. So before we get into the actual critical CIS controls, we're going to talk about security assessments, because to even figure out what's up, you've got to assess the environment first, right? For example, for when you take your car to Firestone, right? You can't walk in. I can't walk in and be like, all right, tell me what you need to do. Tell me what it's going to cost, and then take a look at my car. That makes zero sense. They've got to take a look at my car, identify what's going on with it, then tell me what it is they need to do. Same thing in a security environment or with your application or with your program, right? You've got to assess it first. That's called a security assessment. So different types of organizations, they've got different levels of security risk, whether that's financial, health, school records, or whether it's credit card information or low level, whatever, right? So a security assessment is performed by a company that's got that accredited agency industry security standards set, okay? This is usually an auditor who comes in, or an IT audit analyst, or an IT auditor, or someone in-house will do it. But it's usually following a bigger set of controls. We're going to talk about the CIS controls. There's also NIST standards, ISO standards, which I'm sure you've touched upon in your modules before. But we're going to be talking about the CIS controls today, specifically in how addressing, how you should best address your security assessment results. I'm going to skip this because I'm going to go through this tomorrow. I'll also skip this. I'm going to go through this tomorrow. Actually, you know what? Actually, I might just continue through this, see where we end up, and then I might just start with controls tomorrow. I'll see where we are, but I'm not going to skip through this now. Okay, so security assessments continued. First things first is to conduct a security assessment. You've got to identify some of the methods that the hacker is using to identify those cracks. How you best identify those methods is touching base on those top 10 Owasp vulnerabilities, right? You know, okay, broken authentication is a vulnerability. Let me go through my own application and test it out. If I were to enter a bunch of gibberish in the number column, what happens? Do I get an error thrown back? Does my page break? What happens at that point? That's kind of a posture assessment. So you're trying to mimic something that a hacker would do on your own, just for fun, and you're trying to get those cracks and identify them yourself before you even go through and work on how to fix them, okay? So there's usually 3 types of attack simulations that you can conduct to kind of mimic the hacker, right? So there's vulnerability scanning, 2 types of scans. One, an authenticated scan, which is just that the attacker is given the same level of access that a trusted internal user would have. You test it out. Or an unauthenticated scan, which is just the attacker begins on the outside of the network and literally tries to find vulnerabilities until they break in, little by little by little, until they elevate up to admin. That's unauthenticated. So they're starting from the bottom, literally, and trying to break in, scrape their way in to get up to admin level. So that's vulnerability scanning, and those are the 2 types of scans that you can conduct in that realm. Then there's penetration testing. So these are just tools that you use to run on a network, on a security network, in attempt to exploit them, right? So if I specifically run, a vulnerability assessment on your machine and I see, okay, this brought back 6 vulnerabilities, I'm now going to go attack those 6 vulnerabilities and try to break those because that's my goal, right? So that's that penetration testing. You're physically trying to penetrate the system, okay? I know the name's funny, haha, get all the laughs out now, but this will be the first and last time you'll laugh about it. The first time you hear it, it's funny, and then you'll get over it. Penetration testing is literally because you're trying to break through that core. It's supposed to be a secure environment, that perimeter, right? If you're able to penetrate that, the organization who put up the front has failed. Doesn't mean they're a horrible person. It just means you now have a duty to report that to them so they can better themselves. Then there's red team, blue team exercises. So this is kind of working in a team approach where one team conducts an attack and then real time, the other team tries to defend it. So like we talked about yesterday and today, we simply talked about attacks and defenses. Same thing. So there's going to be a couple people on our red team trying to conduct a ton of attacks. Simultaneously, people on the blue team trying to defend those attacks. And until we meet that level ground of 0, where everything's equaled out, then we're good to go. We've passed our exercise. Okay, so scanning tools. Now, there are a ton of scanning tools out there. A couple I listed on the bottom are Nmap, Nessus, Metasploit, which I'm sure you've heard of a few of those, if not one of them. But scanning tools are used to discover crucial pieces of information on a specific network, so you're able to make sense of it and run penetration tests, run vulnerability tests, etc., right? So if you run these scanning tools on a network, let's say you run Nmap on, let's say, the Careers in Code network, right? I'm going to get all of the host machines on there, all the services and applications that are running on each of those machines, each of the operating systems, if they need updates, what that looks like. Are we on Mac, Windows, Linux? What are we running on? What are the ports that are opened and closed and filtered on all of our hosts? Is there a firewall in place? Is there any gateway in place? Is there any sort of antivirus in place? What programs do we have going? Is there an anti-malware? What is here? And what type of data do we have? Are we seeing a lot of sensitive information like social security numbers, dates of birth? What are we seeing on here? Or are we just seeing favorite colors and class names, right? What is the type of information that we're seeing? So you can actually look up these tools. So of course you have access to my slides. So I would suggest looking up and downloading the free versions of each of these tools, which do exist. Either student/free versions/free trials, but take a look at what these tools are and run a scan on your own computer. because even if you find nothing, it's good to get in practice to see what those results look like. So you know, like, okay, this is what a scan looks like. Cool, I ran a scan. Let me get in the habit of running these monthly or whatever. And you can get into that habit. So when you get into the workforce and start working and doing this stuff, it becomes that second nature because you're already doing it for yourself. So it's a good place to start. Questions on scanning tools? Cool. So physical security, remember that there are devices, of course, right? We're people who work on our computers, and that's data and access and management and information. And then there's our actual computers and the routers and everything like that. But we've also got the physical security to keep in mind, okay? And physical security, it's not just talking about physical devices, okay? We're talking about the actual building, okay? Physical security parameters. Is there a video camera in place? What does the badge access look like? Who has access to what rooms? Can anyone just open up the networking room and just go in there, play around with wires? There should only be 3 people who have access to a network room, if not, maybe 2. Right? Who has access to important file information if people still save, paper files or whatever, right? What do those areas look like? How locked down are they? How secure are they? So restricting your physical access again to your least privilege module. You should not be giving everyone full access. And then when you find out that that darn Caitlin breaks into the room she shouldn't have again, then you lock her access down. It's too late. She already broke in and took whatever she wanted, right? You got to start her off at the lowest amount of access. The worst thing that she's going to do is knock on the door if she can't get in, and someone will open it. Woohoo, okay? She's not gonna die if she can't get in. That's what doors are there for. People are on the other side of them. You knock on it and hopefully someone lets you in. So people always remember that, right? Remember that, because there's always the thing of like, oh, well, I've got the mail people coming in at 6 a.m. and they need to get mail in before 8 and I don't want to come in early. What if they don't have access? That's not your concern. Your concern is top security. Your concern is high security levels, right? Yeah, Caitlin, such a troublemaker. Just like, come on. But physical security, right? So only trusted networking staff should have access to those secure data rooms. That data center, there's one main data center in every organization. And I can tell you from experience, usually 1 or 2 people only have access to that room. And I'm telling you, they have probably been there for 5+ years. Okay. So if you're trying to get into that room because you have malicious intent, you got to get on good graces with someone else to try to get in there. And even if you're trying to get in, the person who has access is probably not going to let you follow them in. They're going to be like, all right, you want to wait outside? I'll just be right back. People who have access to rooms like that, they know, listen, I'm not going to let Latonia in here because I don't know her. I don't know her like that. Like if I knew her, fine. Right. So simple preventative measures are simply locking the door, putting locks on your doors and making them badge only accessible. That way you can associate who you want to have what badges and what badges access what rooms. So if I want Kyle to have full access to everywhere in the building because she's my homegirl, I've known her for 15 years, so I trust it, fine, then I'll give full access badge to Kyle, right? But if I don't know her at all, then I'm not going to give her a full access badge. I'm going to go with something limited. Also, remember the what ifs, right? There's always the scenarios of good protocols and the perfect world, but there's what if someone breaks through? What if we thought we gave Brielle low level access, but it turns out someone in, physical security accidentally gave her full rights, right? Have those detection measures in place. So maybe one time it'll slip. If Brielle tries it again, an alert should trigger. Why is this person trying to enter this data room 2 times in the past 30 minutes? That's kind of weird. She's not even in an IT team. That's also kind of weird. Let me look at that. Let me take a look. Should she even be accessing this room, right? For you to even identify that, you've got to have alerts in place, okay? If you don't know where Brielle is going, you can't reprimand her. You can't lock it down if you don't know what room she's accessing. For you to know what rooms she's accessing, you need to know where her badge has been. For you to know where her badge has been, you need to have her swipe it. And then there's a back end to that so you can view that. Cool beans. All right. Other things we'll talk about, updates and patches. Remember that all devices need updates. Technology does not just magically work on its own. The amount of times that a simple software update or restart will fix your problems, I'm telling you right now, you will be blown away. Next time something doesn't work, check your software update, check your Windows update all of them, check your app updates, update all of them, restart your device, then talk to me. I tell anyone that. Anyone who asks me a technical question, I'm like, did you check the app? Did you close out of all apps, update everything? Have you restarted it in the past hour? If so, then I'll gladly take a look at it. Let's walk through. Let's see. If you didn't do those steps, I don't want to hear it. And you, as a security analyst, you need to put your foot down. You need to say that. Listen, if you didn't restart it, I don't want to talk to you. Computers need to restart. It's got to reset. Let us do that. You'll always get pushback. Oh, but Anissa, I don't want to restart it. Can you just help me right now? I'm sorry, I can't. You need to restart your machine. Let it reset. I need it to do its thing, and then let's go and troubleshoot it. You've got to stand your ground because you don't make the rules. Technology needs to restart. It needs to reset. That's not you trying to be a hard ass for no reason, right? That's just you being like, hey, this is technology that was created by a human. Give it some time. Let it reset. So, update, close out of things, restart things, make sure that you've got all of that fixed. And I know this might seem like this is a no-brainer. This is common sense. Why is Anissa even telling me this right now? Because you will work in a technical role, and you will have people on a technical team coming to you on a security team. Hey, I don't know what's going on here. The first thing you'll do is see that the security analyst has pending security updates because you were just lazy to turn your computer off and let it do the updates, right? Don't go the easy way out. Have you tried turning it off and back? Yes, that's exactly this. That's this. Because you've got to turn it off and you've got to turn it back on. I'm not even kidding. I wish I was making this up. But if I could put a number on it, I'd say 80% of the times, I swear to you, it's like you turn something off, you run the updates, let it rest for a couple minutes, you bring it back to life. I don't know if it's just me. I feel like it's golden after that. I don't know if that's just me, but try it. I promise you. Because technology needs to rest. And sometimes you're going to take hours of your time troubleshooting and you're going to end up having to restart it anyway. And then you've gone through 15 steps and you didn't know which one it was. And what if it was just the restart that helped your problem? You could have saved yourself an hour and a half if you just restarted it when I told you to, right? And then you'll go through the question of you're helping someone on the phone and they're like, oh, well, why didn't we just do this in the beginning? And it's like, well, ma'am, I told you to restart your machine, but you didn't want to. So that's where you learn. You tell them straight up, I'm not helping you unless you restart this because we can't work unless this is restarted, okay? So, and I will tell you this right now, especially in security, you've got the upper hand. and I don't want to say this to make anyone feel overconfident or anyone feel like, oh, listen to me because I'm security. No, I'm just saying that security usually takes precedence because it's security, right? It's not going to be as important as, you know, running a report for your CEO, right? If you have to run a security scan versus run a report for your CEO, the security scan is going to take precedence because that's important, right? Those updates need to be installed in order of operations. That's the top priority. So properly going through identifying those patches, what that looks like are the steps identified here. So that's first starts at discovery. So we're again running that posture assessment, running that assessment to discover what those risks are, what those vulnerabilities are, what exists out there, right? We're discovering them. We're going through, we're playing around, we're just taking a look. We're not doing anything. We're just looking, noting, making notes. Then we've got the standardization. So if Latonia is on Mac OS and everyone else is on Windows OS, I'm sorry, you got to go to Windows OS because it makes sense. Like, I can't support everyone on Windows and only be worrying about one Mac user and you're on my mind all the time and I have to run a different. No, that's hard. If it's just one person and you're not a CEO, you're going back to Windows where everyone else is. We have to keep it standard, okay? Across the board, this goes to updates as well. Everyone should be on the same level of Windows. So this goes to the reason as such. If you've got a specific application on your computer that requires a specific operating system at your job and you haven't run the updates yet, you're not going to be able to use that application. You're not going to be able to do your job. This is why standardization is important. So that's why the security team will usually push those updates to you automatically. So it'll say, oh, your organization requires you to complete these updates. Do you want to do them now or do you want to do them 4 hours later? How many of y'all do the 4 hours later? Or remind me tomorrow, or remind me in 1 hour, right? Let's do those updates now. And actually, rule of thumb, because it's annoying, I know, what I like to do is just do them before bed. Like, go through your app updates and just run them before bed, because all you're going to do is close your laptop and go to sleep. You're not going to need it for anything, right? And that way, when you wake up in the morning, you're good to go. And it took 0 of your time because you were happily asleep, right? So that's a nice time saver that I like to do. Save it for the end of the day if that helps you out. Vulnerability reporting we talked about, so it's just identifying those and then reporting them to the appropriate team or teams. Implementation, so it's actually, okay, what are we going to do? How are we going to fix these problems? And implementing those fixes, right? So we're going to talk about those controls later. Are we going to actually implement those controls? How are we going to do that? Okay. I won't do break. I'm just gonna do kind of talk about a couple controls and until the end of class, and then we'll start off with this again tomorrow. But what I want to do is share this link with you. So Caitlin, I believe she either shared this before or will share it at the end, but I just shared it in the chat. It's the CIS, the 18 controls. So can you guys see my screen right now still? Okay, perfect. So you can see the CIS. So first of all, when I studied this, I will say that it was called the SANS top 20 controls. So when I learned this in college, and you'll see this in the little blurb up top here, it says that it used to be called the SANS critical security controls, or SANS top 20. Then CIS, which is a company called Center for Internet Security, they adopted the controls. They took it over. This is when I was working at Center for Internet Security as an analyst there. So then it was called the CIS critical security controls. Then now version 8, which I believe this is currently version 8 released in like 2020, I want to say, it combines the controls by like, it doesn't consolidate them because it only brought them down from 20 to 18, but it controls them by activities versus the user. And then it kind of differentiates them as such. And then it just went down from 20 to 18. So we're going to probably just get through 1 or 2 of these tonight, and then we'll get through the rest of them tomorrow. But I will say that I want you guys to go through this between now and tomorrow's class, and I want you to go through each of these controls and do some reading on them, because we're not going to spend a crazy amount of time in class going over them tomorrow. So whatever we get through tonight, I want you to make sure you take that extra step on your own and go through this as well, and then we'll finish it up tomorrow. But first of all, we've got the first control, which is inventory and control of enterprise assets. So I didn't make specific slides for these, by the way, because if I did, it would just be verbatim what this says, because this is the control. I'm not going to reword it. So this is, as it says, this is just controlling those assets. This is the inventory of your organization. All of your routers, all of your computers, all of your connected cell phones, your work phones, your USB devices, your laptops, your monitors, everything that's connected to the internet, smart TVs, anything, Chromecast, speakers, anything that's connected to the internet, it is tracked and monitored in this inventory control. Okay, so if you're ever presented with a situation like, okay, I've got like 100 devices, I have no idea how to make sure those are secure, that's where this control comes in, inventory control. So you've got to make sure. So again, this is not going to be applicable to every single situation, right? This is only going to be applicable to situations that have got a ton of assets that need to be controlled. That's where this physical inventory control comes in. So again, you can go through down these. This is the DirectCIS website. So each of them, they have different safeguards as well. We're not going to talk about the safeguards because those are separate. They're just like little sub controls kind of, and they're just like little steps to actually take how you can maximize up to the big control. So the big control is inventory and control of the assets, right? Sub controls are what you actually do to control your assets, right? They're actually telling you those steps. I'm not going to tell you what those are because it's not going to make sense to you unless you have assets you need to control. So I'll leave that up to you to go through and make sense of that and ask me questions as needed tomorrow. But this would be where that's appropriate. Any questions on inventory before we move on? Okay. So enterprise assets, that's like physical devices like we just talked about, what we just went through. Software assets, that's the same thing. That's just on the program side. So, okay, we've got Outlook, we've got Office, we've got Slack, Zoom, QuickBooks. We've got all these applications installed. Who's got access to them? Who's viewing them? What's going on there? We need to control those as well. So physical assets as well as informational assets as well on your computer, on your device. Those are your first two controls. Third, we've got data protection. So what you should be seeing with these controls, what should be popping through your head are the Owasp risks. And you're like, oh, so this control is meant to help that risk. Oh, so this blah, blah, blah. When you go through these tonight, when we go through them today and tomorrow, those thoughts should be running through your head, okay? So data protection, this is directly managing sensitive data as the risk, right? This is data protection. It clearly says this is developing processes and controls to identify, classify, and handle, retain, and dispose of data. That's a lot of words for just some data, okay? It's important. You've got to lock your data down. And if you're solely focused on your crazy amounts of information, you've got health records, you're a big hospital, you've got to look to data protection. You don't care about, logs at that point. Yes, you will at the end of the day, but when you think priorities, data protection should come up top priority, not logs at that point. Any questions on data protection? And I know tonight is really lecture focused, guys. I promise tomorrow you're not going to hear me a lot. I'm going to be hearing a lot from you guys. We're going to look at your projects. We're really going to try to apply these specific things again within breakout rooms that I'm going to be popping within in and out. So I know it's a lot. We'll get through them. But this will really help too if you guys take the time and go through some of these tonight, even if you take 30 minutes tonight or sometime tomorrow and just go through these controls, so at least you have them in your head. So when we run through the rest of them tomorrow, they will kind of at least be familiar to you. All right, the other one I want to go through right now is account management. And I think this is the last one I'm going to stop at for tonight. Account management. Can anyone tell me what Owasp, well, first of all, read this. Take a couple minutes to read account management. And then if I could have a volunteer tell me which Owasp vulnerability this you think would directly mitigate against. Any thoughts? Oh, are there things in the chat? If there are, I can't. Oh, there are.
I was just about to start calling
them sorry. Out. That's my bad. I should have been looking. Okay, too many admins. Good. Security misconfiguration. Good. Access control. Broken access control. So I'm gonna take Kyle's on that one. I'm not saying anyone else is wrong. I'm saying in a matter of priority, broken access control would be the key here. And why is that? That's because it's very clearly here that this is account management that's using processes and tools to manage that credentials for user accounts, including admin accounts. So that should be that indicator like, oh, admin. So I got to make sure I'm differentiating between regular users, admins, etc. And really identifying those very clearly here, because that identifies what access they have physically to physical devices, to software, to control data within the organization, to view data within the organization. So account management, identity management, access management, all of that kind of jazz is very, very important. It falls under within this control, which is control 5. Okay, I think this is a good ending point for the night. Again, I want you guys to go through this either tonight or tomorrow, go through the rest 6 to 18. It'll probably take you less than half an hour to scroll through and kind of just make sense of these. And then we're going to finish up those tomorrow and then jump right into your capstone projects and really talking about how we can secure those, what we need to do. We'll talk about some scanning options. You guys can run those scans tomorrow so you can get a really personalized feel on what you can do for your specific application. But I know I was talking a lot. My voice is hoarse, I know. But questions before I let you guys go for the evening.
I was wondering, are the logs the only kind of documentation? You were talking a lot about them, but
oh,
when you mentioned documentation, is that the only thing?
No, so actually, good question. I'm sorry I wasn't clear on that. Logs wouldn't even be considered documentation. That's something that exists to write documents. So documentation, for example, is outlining processes and how that works. So for example, within a company, this is how the security team works. This is what you need to do if this happens. If you get a phishing email, send it to this, whatever. That's process documentation. Then there's technical documentation. Okay, when I run a Nessus scan every month, these are the servers I'm running the scan on. I'm running it on Tuesday morning at 8 o'clock before business hours, etc. That process is documented. That's a technical documentation. Then there's user documentation, like training modules and purposes. Like, okay, I'm going to put a slide deck together. I'm going to put a white paper together. This is how you use the product from a user and end user perspective. And that's to name a few. I mean, it depends, right? There's technical documentation, non-technical, marketing focused, blog writing. I'm a technical writer, but I write for APIs. So we're a cybersecurity company and we use REST APIs, and we've got about like 60 something APIs, and I document how all of those work internally for our team. So for any oncoming developers who join our team, they understand how processes work so they can come develop and jump right in. And then I create documents for end users who are using our product. Okay, when you're creating this API on your own network, what should you look for? What are some errors you could see? What do they mean, etc., in a user-friendly document. But I also assist my marketing team with like white papers and like putting out blog posts and stuff. So like it really depends on what your niche is and what your interests are and what route you want to go. But documentation is usually not the priority on security teams, because security teams are usually very technical, right? So everyone's like, oh, who cares about documentation, whatever. And then you always are like, oh, now we got to hire someone to come in and document everything that we didn't document before. So it's good to start with those practices and follow them through. Good question. Other questions? If none, that's okay. All right, guys, cool beans. It was really great tonight. Thank you for bearing with me. I know it was a lot of words, I know, but take a look at the slides, review them, go through these controls and kind of see where they can help, and look through these controls, be like, oh, this is the one control I know I need, right? And make note of that, because we'll cover that tomorrow and that'll help us really get good footing on your project. And how you can better secure it. So I know Caitlin just dropped the 30-second feedback form in. That really helps me and helps us better teach you guys. So please fill that out. But if you have questions, shoot me an email, a Slack message, anything like that, or Caitlin, and she'll send it to me. But last call for questions before I let you guys have a great Tuesday night. Going once, going twice. All right, have a good night, guys. I will see you tomorrow. Good work.